Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is Hotcast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Go Iowa Awesome and Rivals.com. I am your recruiting analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined as always by Adam Jacoby and Ross Binder from Iowa.Rivals.com. Before we get started, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, drop a like, drop a comment on YouTube, and if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., subscribe, leave that rate and review, and we appreciate it a lot, and it does make us very happy. The women, Iowa women, coming off a Big Ten tournament championship for the third year in a row. They defeat Nebraska in overtime, making every Iowa fan almost have a panic attack. Were they down 8 with 2.5 minutes left or something like that? Something crazy?
Yeah.
Not only down 8 with 2.5 minutes left, but had just turned the ball over to Nebraska. And the Huskers had a wide open 3-point shot. If they hit that, Iowa's down 11 with under 2.5 minutes to go. And that is more or less the dagger. So the fact that Nebraska, I think it was, oh gosh, was it Plessy? I've already forgotten her name. Nisley. I was not even that close. Nisley misses that 3-pointer. Caitlin comes back down the other way and hits her own step back three about 10 seconds later. All of a sudden, 5-point game. So that's essentially a 6-point swing. And it was, Iowa needed it. And it set the stage for one of the most incredible rallies that I've been able to personally witness. And I say that having not personally witnessed the Iowa-Michigan State men's basketball rally, because that's obviously its own highest all-time craziest rally. This wasn't quite that. But what this was an incredible, intense, competitive, high-stakes basketball game. And that is, that's why you buy the tickets. That's what you show up hoping to see. And fans got that on Sunday. Just an incredible game of basketball and a real privilege to be able to see it live. Ross, you were sitting there right next to me. What were your impressions of it?
Well, I was just stunned by the whole thing. The tension that was just palpable. You mentioned the Michigan State comeback for the men, and statistically and obviously, just in terms of the unlikeliness, that was a bigger, crazier comeback. But the stage of this one being the Big Ten tournament final, a possible three-peat for the women, a possible 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. There was so much at stake in this game that even added more, oomph to the proceedings. So to have a comeback like that in a setting like that with so much on the line was really remarkable. And just the energy from the crowd was unbelievable. And it's funny because you mentioned the day before when we were writing up the semifinal game, it's Iowa hasn't been tested yet in this tournament. They got tested.
That's right. I think specifically I said we haven't really seen them have to play for 40 minutes. And I guess technically we still haven't seen that because they needed 45 for this one. Yes. But
yeah.
that when we look at the 4 losses that Iowa's had this year, they really did come down to Iowa not really being able to put together a quality 20-minute second half when the other team is, able to sort of match them. And the fact that Iowa was able to put that together, including in some really tough circumstances with Clark's, shots rattling in and out with a basketball that they don't normally play with, there were built-in excuses. There's the history of them not really always closing out their games. And so the fact that they were able to do that here against an opponent that was as motivated as any are going to be to take Iowa down, and my goodness, Nebraska wanted that win bad and played like it. If they could have won the Big Ten tournament, 2, taken the series rubber match over the Hawkeyes, they were probably going to be building statues to Alexis Markowski and Amy Williams is the coach's name, I believe.
Yeah,
those would already be up in Lincoln now. That would have been a crowning achievement for that program. And I don't even mean that in a belittling way, because if you flip the tables and Iowa's the upstart team and Nebraska is the one with their own Caitlin Clark. Yeah, I would want Iowa to be celebrating, taking the Big Ten tournament off of them for years and years and years. That is the sort of thing that you build off of as a program. So, like, the fact that Iowa took the puncher's best punch straight to the grill for 40 minutes and still found a way to come out with the win, just incredible, and should give this team as much confidence as they need going into the real dance, the big dance.
Yeah, I mean, the shots they were making at the end of the game, that's kind of what stood out to me was just, everything that needed to go right for that comeback to happen, and then did go right. And, things like Clark missed every three-pointer in the first half that she attempted, and, just could not find the mark. And then she gets the step back three to cut it to 5 late in the game. She got another step back three. She got the step back three in overtime to give them the final lead that they ended up winning with. And it's like, her shot was not falling it started to fall in the third quarter, I think. But it was so bad in the first half, just couldn't get it. And so for her to, make those shots, when they had to have them, and just a high degree of difficulty shot, like, it's that crazy step back three she does is not an easy one, and yet she makes it look so easy because that's who she is. And then, I mean, Kate Martin, like, had not scored a point, made a bucket, and then makes, what was it, 4 threes at the end of regulation and overtime, or is it 3?
So she finished 4 for 5 and was 0 for 1 from behind the arc at halftime and only made 1 in the third quarter. So, I mean, all you have to do is draw the dividing line at halftime. And Caitlin Clark and Kate Martin after that went 9 for 12 from behind the arc. And again, Iowa needed all of it. That's what it took for Iowa to pull this comeback off. And again, like 5 minutes of overtime too. That's how well Nebraska was playing. And if Nebraska plays like that in the big dance, I mean, we're probably looking at the very least a Sweet 16 team, because that Husker team is not quite as high octane as Iowa's, and their depth is not as good as Iowa's, certainly, but they're good enough, and they were playing game number 4 and on day number 4 too. Let's throw that into the mix. They did not look like the team with better legs than Iowa's. And so for them to come out there and compete like that and get great performances from I would say 4 of their starting 5 had great games. Yeah, Iowa should be as proud of that win as basically any of them on their schedule this year. And that's a high bar to clear.
Okay. So, unlike these two distinguished gentlemen, I was not at the game. And there's 2 things that I wanted to talk about in reference to it. What's their center's name?
Markowski? Alexis
Markowski.
Markowski. Yeah.
Was nasty. She is good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she is good. And definitely gave Hannah some fits. Big time performance by Addie O'Grady in the minutes that she played defensively. She was vital in winning that game, and she's going to have to be vital in the tournament too, because you're going to run into some other bigs that are just as good, if not better, than Markowski. So that's definitely the primary thing that they're going to run into, that a lot of people took issue with last year, that they didn't add a big in the portal that was elite or what have you. Some of that talent just all kind of conglomerated at LSU, and we've seen how that's worked out for them. But the other thing too is Caitlin was missing shots in the first half that she normally makes. So that's a factor when you look at how Nebraska was able to stay in it. And additionally, the difficulty degree that she was making shots at the end of regulation and in overtime, like you mentioned, Ross, Iowa doesn't win that game without, like, often Iowa doesn't win that game without Caitlin Clark, right? Like you could say that about every game more or less, but like there were a couple times in regulation where that lead was there and Nebraska was holding on to it. And I was just like, what? Caitlin, why are you taking that shot? that early in the clock. And then she'd do it again in overtime, in regulation, later in regulation. I'd be like, Caitlin, what? Never mind. You got
There
it.
goes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So it was fun and nerve-wracking to watch. I mean, I was sitting there watching it with my parents and my girlfriend, and one thing I can't stand to do, I don't know about you guys, is to watch sports with people who don't regularly watch sports and they feel like they need to react to it as it's happening instead of just watching it. Like,
The
oh,
casuals.
why'd she do that? That's my mom impression. That's my why would she shoot that?
Well, she wanted it to go into the hoop for points.
Yeah.
That's generally the impetus.
So, and it's not like my mom doesn't know sports. She's just also very the way she is. But anyway, so it was still phenomenal. And the other thing to add to that level of shot making, to that reference to Markowski, is they took the biggest punch that they could possibly take in this scenario against a team like Nebraska, and they didn't lay down and die. They kept fighting, and they won the game. And that's a pretty strong thing to have on your resume going into the NCAA tournament. Obviously, we don't know seeds yet, but we're very much looking forward to that. Is Iowa, I wouldn't say a lock for a 1 seed, but they've got a stronger case for that 1 seed, right? Are they a lock? They are the number 2 team in the they're the number 2
pretty
team
close.
in the AP poll. So once that I was reminded of that, I was like, wait a minute, shut up, Eliot. So are they? What did you say, Ross? They're pretty locky.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me why you feel like they're locky.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's their results and the results from the other teams around them in that kind of tier of contention for the 1 seed. You know, they won the Big Ten tournament. Ohio State lost in the quarterfinal, so that was a direct competitor for a 1 seed. That they exceeded them, and they beat Ohio State a week ago at home finish up the regular season. UCLA and Stanford got beat in the Pac-12 tournament, which kind of knocked down their chances a little bit. So I think just the way Iowa was able to end the season with all some really good wins, win the Big Ten tournament again. They have a strong, they got some good non-conference wins from K-State and Iowa State that are holding up pretty nicely. And I mean, they're number 2 in the AP, which isn't, determinative for seeding, of course, but it's a good general indicator, I think. So, I mean, and the bracketology, like the ESPN, Charlie Cream, he has them as a 1 seed. So there seems like a strong consensus that they're a 1 seed. We're not going to know, for certain until, a week from yesterday, Sunday, when they announced the bracket. But I think most people would be surprised if they were not a 1 seed at this point, just based on kind of their body of work and the other kind of competitors for that slot too.
Yeah, when you look at the teams that Iowa would have to beat out for 1 seed, obviously South Carolina, mortal lock at number 1 overall. They'll be in Albany, and they will be favored heavily in every single tournament game they play, regardless of opponent. Over there in the Pac-12, you've got USC and Stanford. ESPN has them both as 1 seeds already. That was a very, very competitive conference. UCLA is sort of the odd team out there. And so between UCLA, Ohio State, I don't think has any claim to be ahead of Iowa at this point. Ohio State's a 2 seed. UCLA, they've got as a 2, and I don't think you can make the case that UCLA has a better resume than Iowa's at this point. LSU, no. Sorry, but no. Texas is really the only team of those 2 seeds that still has a path to get ahead of Iowa, just because there's still games for Texas to play. But, KSU is not the resume building win that it used to be. Right now, ESPN's got them as a 5 seed. They'd be playing Drake, incidentally. So go Dogs. But that's the Des Moines native in me coming out there. But by and large, when you look at the resume that Texas has, Iowa at the very least has Kansas State as a non-conference win. If Kansas State is the second best team, or the 3rd best team in your conference, then that sort of indicates that the level of quality wins, and it really does drop off after that in the Big 12. So there are just not a whole lot of quality wins for Texas to come by too. And then, that leaves room for USC and Stanford to be 1 seeds, which I think at minimum Stanford has earned, and you could really make the case that USC has too. So like that also gives the tournament the flexibility to have Stanford and USC playing out west in Portland for their regionals. Sure. South Carolina and Iowa would be the teams in Albany. And yeah, like that tracks. That makes sense. And Iowa should be especially pleased about that because that means that South Carolina would not be facing the Hawkeyes until the championship game in Cleveland. And I think if you look at these 64/68 teams, I think everybody is really, really hoping it's Iowa and South Carolina for all the marbles, right? Like Dawn Staley versus Lisa Bluter, the Gamecock juggernaut versus Caitlin Clark, right? Like, especially after last season's semifinal game, everyone is going to want to see that rematch with even higher stakes.
Iowa's the only team to beat them in the last 2 seasons, right? I think weren't they undefeated prior to that Iowa game last year, and they're undefeated again this year. So
that's correct. Yeah. So that is, Caitlin Clark doesn't have a championship on her resume, but she does have a Gamecock stuffed and mounted on her living room wall. So at the very least, there's some taxidermy involved. It's not hardware, it's not brass, but it's certainly a pelt to be proud of.
Just a chicken from a farm in Iowa.
You don't normally see taxidermied chickens.
All right.
Depends what part of Iowa you're in.
Now, as we continue to approach the tournament, how much, or I guess, have you heard anything about Molly Davis, Adam, and her timetable to return?
They had said that she was going to be undergoing treatment this week, and they did not provide any more details on that. So as it stands right now, she is still out indefinitely with that knee injury, and it really doesn't serve Iowa's best interest for them to be any more detailed than that. Like they have to play their own little information game with the rest of the teams in the conference. I will say that the Molly Davis question really seemed to loom larger prior to the tournament than after, based on how Affolter played in the starting lineup. She earned her way onto that all-conference team, and I say earned very deliberately because you look at the way that she stepped up, not only as a scorer, has always been a great rebounder and a hustler, but she also went from 2.3 assists per game in the regular season. In fact, that was even with that. She was closer to 2.0 assists in the regular season. She hops in the starting lineup for the Big Ten tournament, averaged 5.3 assists in those 3 games, and did a great job of really directing the traffic in the half-court sets too. There was one play in particular I asked Sid about in the post-game interview room, and you could see her, and it was the 3-pointer that they kicked out to Kate Martin in overtime that either cut into the lead or gave Iowa a lead or a bigger lead. In fact, it was a 3-pointer that gave Iowa the 5-point lead, as I recall. But Iowa had gotten an offensive rebound. Ball swings its way around to Affolter. And from our perspective, Stuelke came from the low post to about the elbow of the key and sets a screen. Affolter, dribbles around it, draws this defender, and what it does is open up a passing lane to the far corner where Kate Martin is standing. And that was some 3D, 4D chess that, I mean, honestly, it's the sort of vision you would expect from a Caitlin Clark or a Molly Davis. And the fact that she orchestrates it, makes a pass, and it was a great pass too. It was exactly in the basket, exactly where it needed to be. Martin was able to get it up and get it in. It was, I think, her fourth and final 3-pointer of the day. And that was the sort of play that doesn't happen by accident. And so when I asked Sid about it after the game, she says, yeah, what's great about our offense is that we're not robots. Like we're running the offense, but that was not all like, okay, I have the ball here. Here is how we run this. Like it was not a Brian Ferentz type of like calling the offense this or that. It was her understanding of her role in that offense. They're working off of feel as much as anything. And like Affolter said, like we're hard to defend because we don't always know what we're going to do when that play starts or when that possession starts. It's all about where the holes open up. And so the fact that she's able to process that in real time, make that perfect, correct pass right on time, that shows me that the game has started to slow down for her too. And it's when the game starts to slow down, and Eliot, I think we heard Kirk Ferentz like mention that about Sebastian Castro quite a bit. It's when the game starts to slow down that you really start to see these athletes put their gifts and put their training to their best use. And we're seeing that ascension from Affolter right now. I think she's going to be a high-level starter in the Big Ten for Iowa next season. And the drop-off in terms of productivity, like her role might change, but she's going to be every bit as productive. And I think she's going to be an asset for Iowa to continue to be this high-level Big Ten contender type of team. I think Iowa is still going to be a contender in the Big Ten next year, even without Caitlin Clark. And it's because Affolter is, boy, all you have to do is watch her. You know she has all Big Ten potential in her, and she does too. That's the scary part for the rest of the Big Ten. She said, hey, I've been doing this in practice for years. Like, I knew I could do this. There was no like, yay, what about me? Like, none of this was a surprise to her. It wasn't a surprise to Kate Martin. It's not a surprise to Bluter. This is just Affolter is making this leap statistically because of who she's been playing behind. She's been ready. And so I think we're going to see that continue not only in next season, but especially if Davis continues to be out. You know, it does not look like Iowa has the urgency to get Davis back on the court that it sort of felt like the Hawkeyes did last week. Affolter has staked her claim to that starting spot, and it really does look like the proof is there that Iowa can be confident in her in that role until Davis comes back. And if Davis doesn't come back, if healing, there's only so much control we have over how surgeries and bodies and like trauma like that heals. And so if she's not able to come back, or if Iowa, loyalists cover your ears here, but if Iowa doesn't make the Final Four this year, that'll be at the very least fine too, because I don't think it'll be Affolter's quote fault if Iowa does not make it there, right? She does not look like a weak link in the starting lineup. In fact, it doesn't look like there is a weak link in the starting lineup at this point, still, even without Molly Davis. So that question, I think, has been more or less resolved. How Iowa plays without Molly Davis against the elite teams that they're going to play, because we didn't see her against, like Iowa didn't have to play Indiana or Ohio State to win that tournament. They're probably not going to be able to avoid those great teams in March Madness the way that they did last season. So it's still sort of an open question about how is Affolter going to do against a top 5, a top 10 defense or slash team. But I think the uncertainty is not nearly what it used to be. So Iowa can hang their hat on that. Affolter can hang their hat on that. Ross, even though Affolter shot only 2 for 10 on Sunday, I thought her shot looked good. Is there anything that you saw out of her that you thought, looked like a weakness to her game, especially in that like newer, larger role this weekend? Or do you think too that she looked pretty darn good?
I thought she looked excellent. I mean, in the first half of that final, you mentioned that Kate Martin and Caitlin Clark, they were huge after halftime and had a tremendous production, and that's what enabled Iowa to A, get back in the game, and then ultimately win it. But the reason they were even, within distance at halftime was largely because of Affolter. She had a great first half, and helped Iowa, kind of keep within striking distance of Nebraska, with Caitlin unable to hit any shots. I think, didn't Affolter have 9 points in the first half? I mean, I think she was doing a lot of damage at the free throw line.
She had 9 points at halftime, and all 6 of her offensive rebounds came in the first half, which 6 offensive rebounds in the first half. That's what Affolter brings to the table that you kind of can't teach. And she's only 5'11", right? Like, she's not Cardosa at USC. She's not doing that just because she's like taller than everyone and just like reaches up and gets the ball first. That's all effort. That's all smarts. That's all understanding where the ball is going to be before most of the other women on the court understand where it's going to be, which again sort of tracks with how Molly Davis plays too. So that too indicates a level of basketball IQ that tells me Iowa's going to be fine as long as Affolter's starting too.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about her skill set. Sorry, Eliot, I'll get to you in just a second here. Her passing was excellent in this tournament. She was really doing a great job of distributing the ball, getting it to shooters. Her rebounding is, among the best on the team. She's just a phenomenal rebounder, great instincts, knows where to be, knows how to get the rebounds, which is just an incredible skill to have and to utilize like that. Her shot, she's not quite as creative or the shot maker that Molly is, if you're looking for a weakness, quote unquote, in her game. But, I think she's a great catch and shoot shooter. She's a very good free throw shooter. She's a great, getting those putbacks around the rim, that her touch in the paint is very good, very strong. So I think there's just a lot of assets that she brings to the table. And, you look at, a player like, what do they bring to the table? What do they take away? She doesn't take away that much when she's on the court, for the team. She's providing a lot of positives, and there are I would say no significant negatives, and just, skills that she doesn't do as well, maybe, or like the, what you would say are, the worst part of her game per se. But yeah, I mean, I think she definitely, proved her spot in the starting lineup is something that Iowa can be very successful with during this tournament. And I expect her to stay in that spot, at least to start the NCAA tournament. Seems like they're maybe unofficially targeting the Sweet 16, hopefully, for Molly Davis to be back. I think that we'll see. Iowa's got to get there first. She's got to, continue to recover well, and I think we'll see what happens at that point. But I don't think there's any reason Iowa fans should be concerned about Sydney Affolter starting games for Iowa, especially for the next couple of weeks. But you were going to add something, Adam, and then I know Eliot had something too.
Yeah. I'm just gonna toss this out just because it just hopped down to the timeline, and then we'll drop it there. But I guess the ratings are starting to come out for the Big Ten tournament in general, and for Friday night, which is what's just been released, which was the quarterfinal game. According to Keith Murphy via Sports Media Watch, Big Ten Network averaged 1.04 million for the Iowa Penn State game. Easily the largest women's sports audience ever on the network. Now, those ratings are only going to go up for the Michigan game, presumably. And, CBS had the conference championship game. So even though that was its own, like 11 a.m. felt like 10 a.m. sort of thing, my guess is we are well into the 1 millions and maybe topping even 2 million on that too, which is absolutely bonkers to even think about for a women's game or just a college basketball game in 2024 period at this point. So the national audiences remain there for Caitlin Clark. Shocking, I know. All right, that's all I want to throw in. Eliot, we've been pushing you off for quite a while now.
So to my original question regarding Molly Davis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I guess What? How much would her return one affect the team in a positive direction? I don't see it affecting him in a negative direction by any means. But two, is there a level of concern about her fitness in returning? Because I imagine with that knee, she cannot do much with her cardio while she's out.
Yeah, I think that is a valid concern. And yeah, you do want to make sure that she's going to be effective for as long as she's going to be on the court. Otherwise, those minutes have to go to somebody else. This is not a scenario where you've got the luxury of somebody playing their way back into shape on the court, unless I was up by 20, 25 points and this and that. And even then, you almost don't look at the game time as the arena in which you put in that work to get your fitness back up too. You want to be doing that in practice. You want to be doing that outside of the games. These specific 2-hour windows, they are the most competitive environments that you're going to be able to participate in, and you do want to get those competitive juices flowing too. Like, and there's only so much that you can get that in practice, Eliot, that too. But at the same time, it really does seem like if Molly Davis comes back, like that's still an if at this point. And until she's listed on the roster, I think you have to look at it as an if or as opposed to when. Unless and until she is back, or if she does come back, I think you are looking at her as a bench player for at the very least that first weekend. So if she doesn't come back until the Final Four, I think you bring her off the bench that week, or for those two games. If she's able to come back for Sweet 16 weekend / regional weekend, yeah, you bring her off the bench there, and then you start to think about, all right, can we put 30 minutes back on her docket? And that is not a sure thing. And at the very least, we've seen from this Iowa team that if Molly can't give you 30 minutes, well, we've seen now that if Molly can't give you any minutes, they'll be okay. Did they play well enough against Nebraska that if it were South Carolina on the other side of the court, would Iowa have won that game? No. No. And would Molly Davis have brought Iowa's quality of play up to a more competitive against the elite? Yeah. So I think in terms of the starting five, I was fine. But what Molly Davis brings to the table as much as anything is not just, what her production is versus Affolter, but it's who's ultimately ending up with the minutes that Davis is sort of leaving out. Affolter was already a 22-minute a game sort of player, and in the Big Ten in the regular season, that was bumping up against 30 minutes because she was so effective in the fourth quarter as a game closer, even if she wasn't a game starter. So really, what it comes down to is the difference between Molly Davis and Kylie Feuerbach or Taylor McCabe, because those two are getting minutes that they would not have seen, or getting more minutes because of Molly Davis's absence. Kylie Feuerbach's played pretty well. She has earned a rather permanent spot in the rotation, and even when Molly comes back, I think Iowa can be confident in still letting Kylie have some of those minutes too, especially if there's a ramp up situation with her fitness, Eliot, exactly like you mentioned. So I think there are ways that Iowa can plan that ramp up and not have it be terribly disruptive to the team. But ultimately, you are just sort of depending on what Molly Davis tells you she can do, and depending on what she's able to prove that she can do. And you sort of build her back into the plans accordingly. And if her knee's not 100%, if there's some aspect of the game that she's not going to be able to do as well, you can find somebody else in the rotation who can do that for her. So I think Iowa is not in a tough spot necessarily. They will be able to account for whatever contingencies they need to, but they do have a lot of contingencies that they do sort of need to plan around with her at this point. So it's it's not really a satisfying answer, but it is sort of a wait and see situation with her.
Anything else we need to address with the women before we move on to the men's game?
Yeah. I just had two things I wanted to talk about. Gabby Marshall's block at the end of the game yesterday was like play of the game, probably. I mean, there were all the amazing Caitlin threes, the Kate Martin threes, and Caitlin's pass to Hannah Stolke, 3/4 court, just bullet pass with under 2 minutes remaining. That was insane to me. Like, to even think about trying that pass at that point, incredible. And then to make it perfect like she did, even more amazing. But Gabby Marshall's block, like that defense, like I wrote about this, for our site yesterday. So go read that at iowa.rivals.com. But those big defensive plays by Gabby and by Caitlin Clark were just immense. And you almost never see someone block a 3-point shot as cleanly as that. Like, that was a volleyball spike. And then it stayed in bounds and she got it and she called timeout. Like, she was not just going.
It's your 5'9" guard.
Yeah, she's 5'9". She did all of that. And she still had the presence of mind to like grab the ball and call timeout. So Iowa, got the possession. So it was just an unbelievable play by, she's been a great defender for her entire Iowa career. And to have, I think that may be the signature Gabby Marshall play. When you think about her time at Iowa, that's going to be a tough one to top. And that was just a huge, huge play, just in a big moment. And then the other thing I just wanted to bring up was the Iowa crowd, the Iowa fans all weekend were incredible. I mean, we called it Carver North, and that was not in jest at all. Like, I wasn't at the Iowa-Ohio State game, so maybe Adam can speak to this and kind of more directly compare the atmospheres for that game and Carver, actual Carver, versus, like the game yesterday. But there were a overwhelming amount of Iowa fans selling out the Target Center. All 3 games they played, Friday night, Saturday night, and yesterday noon, early start, very early start. And they were loud. They were just incredibly vocal, incredibly into it. The players, they all, and Bluter praised the crowd after the games, and they probably would not have been able to make that comeback without the energy that crowd provided them, which is believable because the energy provided by that crowd was palpable. Like, they were just, when the comeback started in the second half, like, they were roaring. And I live up here. I know the Target Center has been renovated within the last 10 years, so I know it's, structurally sound. That's the only reason I would not be concerned about the roof blowing off after the way the Iowa fans were going nuts this weekend, because it was loud. Adam, what did you think about that?
Yeah, I would say the Ohio State games peaks were a little bit louder than the Target Center. But it's sort of like comparing peaks of mountains. Well, like we're still talking about the rarest of air. We're talking about like incredible levels of noise. And there were moments where I was sort of thinking like, wow, my ears kind of hurt. Like, it was still loud. Eliot, you had compared the Ohio State game at Carver to a religious experience. And that was, sort of a vibe that I had only gotten from one other game before, the Iowa Penn State football game in 21. This didn't quite feel like that. And that's not to say that it like could have been, that's not a like better or worse, this or that. It was a different vibe to it, though. It was because there was just more tension, right? The Ohio State game, Iowa was leading the whole way. It was a celebration as much as anything. Iowa fans did not have a whole lot to celebrate, especially in regulation. And when when the crowd was able to get loud, when Iowa was able to start to put together some of these things, I mean, Jazz Shelley, I think whenever the arena is over 100 decibels, I think Jazz Shelley's effective field goal percentage goes up to like 700%. It's like she loves knocking down shots when the crowd is hyped. She just says Markowski's the same way. And that is one of the reasons why I think Nebraska, if they play like that, if they're motivated like that, they sort of remind me of a Sweet 16, like a spoiler, like knock off a 1 seed sort of team. Right now, they're projected as either an 8 or a 9 seed, according to Charlie Crane and ESPN. If I were a 1 seed, and Iowa assuredly will not be playing, they cannot be matched up against Iowa. So, wipe your brows, everybody, because they played 3 times. So that is the scenario in which the selection committee will not put 2 teams in that same bracket. So one of those other 3 seeds, if you see Nebraska in round 2, do not feel like that's going to be a walk in the park, because they are motivated, they're ready, and they've got the players. We haven't even talked about Natalie Potts, that freshman on the interior who drove Iowa crazy. She too, I'm not going to say that on the podcast. I'll put it this way: Iowa could use a big like Natalie Potts next season. No. It really does seem like Iowa could use someone like her. Ross, what are you going to say?
I was just going to say that, for at least the first half of that game, she was the best number 22 on the floor, which that never gets said when Caitlin Clark is, on the floor. But Potts was better than her in the first half, at least. By the end of the game, definitely Clark had reclaimed her mantle. But
there's only one with like Clark's supernova gear. So, but Potts was really good too. And she also is the sort of player that if a 1 seed is not careful, if a 1 seed takes Nebraska lightly, that might be a very quick exit from the tournament and a very large amount of home fans going home upset, because that would be on that team's home court, whoever it is. And do not consider that an automatic W, fellow 1 seeds. Don't do it. All right. That's enough out of me.
Are we good? Move on to the men?
Yeah.
Okay. 3 years later. All right. So lost to Illinois on Sunday, and there were select moments where it was within reach. Guys, I don't know if you watched it, listened to it, were able to see highlights, whatever. Iowa starts 1 of 14 from the field. It was brutal. And the thing we heard in postgame for both Fran and Peyton was we were getting good shots. They just weren't going in. And that's exactly what we were saying. I was saying on Twitter during the game. I can't tell you how many of those shots just rimmed out. It was like, as much as that last Ohio State game was a religious experience, it was like all the angels from that one came back. It's like angels in the outfield, but bad. They're just coming in and popping them out. And
those are devils. Those are devils.
Right, yeah.
Devils in the paint.
Right. And so it was almost frustrating. It's like, what? And they were down 22-4 at one.
I was gonna say, wasn't it 22-4? I think.
Yeah.
Pretty, and that, I mean, that wasn't the end of the game, but it kind of was. It's like you're down 18 that early, and against a team as good as Illinois. That's the tough part. Is it's going to be tough to overcome a deficit like that against a team that good, and it's going to be hard to get enough stops against Illinois. And it seemed like that ended up being a pretty big problem. Other than, I don't know if the shooting ever came around for some guys. You mentioned it in your recap and also on Twitter that I think out of the 3 seniors shot a combined, what was it, 2 of 16?
2 of 16 for 9 points. Ben Krikke had 2 free throws in the first 5 minutes and didn't score after that.
Yikes.
Yeah. Patrick, I think, had a 3 in garbage time. Tourney was 1 of 10. It was bad. It was really, really bad for the 3 seniors.
Elliot, this is somehow even bleaker. Crickey's free throws didn't come in the first 5 minutes. They came at basically the 7-minute mark. So like 13:03 was left on the clock. He hits his 2 free throws. That pushed the game from 17-2 to 17-4. 7 minutes into the game. And yeah, like it's hard for this team to dig out of holes like that against mediocre teams. And just look at the Indiana game. Like that is a prime example of this team is not like they can dig themselves out of it. Can they do that and then hold on to the lead, keep that lead, until the game is finished? And defensively, they're just not good enough. They do not get stops nearly reliably enough for even a 5-point lead to feel safe with even a couple minutes left. And so if a 5-point lead for you is not safe late, then putting yourself down 21 or 20, let's see, their largest was 21. It was 39. Putting yourself down by that much means that you not only have to make up those 21 points, but you also have to do that scoring that gives you the safety of a bigger lead. So essentially, your hole is already. Don't finish that sentence, Adam. That could have gotten taken out of context so poorly.
Heavens FX out of nowhere. Gonna just kill us.
Your deficit is already bigger than it looks on paper. Deficit is already bigger than it looks. So, yeah, that aspect of Iowa, I think as this team matures, as they get more experience, and candidly, as they get some of these seniors who are not consistent defenders, as they cycle themselves out of the program, I think Iowa will be better at avoiding situations like the first half or the first 10 minutes of this Illinois game, and avoiding the need to, one, dig themselves out of it too, but then two, to, sort of hang on for dear life when in those last 5 minutes, when the most important thing your team can be doing is getting stops. Like that is priority A number one. And we don't see this Iowa team play like that is a priority number one in those last 5 minutes yet. I think some of that has to do with the seniors on this team. And if you look at who, this freshman class and the underclassmen, I think they are a little bit more predisposed to be competitive straight out of the gate and through those 40 minutes. As they get more experience, as those skills really bring themselves up, I think this will sort of be an artifact of, the past. That being said, we've been saying that about Fran McCaffery teams for close to a decade now. So maybe I'm the one with the clown makeup on. Who knows? We'll see.
Then again, I don't know that we've seen an on-ball defender like Josh Dix come through, and who's also pretty damn good offensively. Again, struggles were team-wide. I mean, he was 6 of 13 from the field, but also 0 of 3 from deep. And of course, he hasn't put up very many rebounds this year. I think it was against Illinois the first time he played 36 minutes and didn't have a rebound, or 38 minutes and didn't have a rebound. So of course that's something that is of mine for Josh Dix, but he's going to be a star both ways coming up here soon. He's going to be contending for all Big Ten teams, especially next year. So having your arguably probably your best player, at least when Peyton Sandfort moves on, when Josh Dix is a senior, be a leader defensively is going to help things in that regard. But who knows? Call me a clown too, in a couple of years. But additionally, I mentioned the rebounding for Josh. Iowa missed, here's the stat line from the game. I'll just read it across the board. 23 of 65 from the field, 7 of 21 from 3. So they shot, see here, 35.38% from the field, which is bad. 33.3% from the field, or from 3, which is doable, but 35.38% from the field is atrocious. And the first thing that Fran said regarding the loss was that they missed 42 shots and got 3 offensive rebounds. That, he said, that is unacceptable, and he was exactly right. You cannot miss that many shots and not get boards. Illinois is a good basketball team. They've got some beefy guys in the paint, but Owen Freeman, who led the team in rebounds, I think with 8, probably should have had 12, 13. You look at a guy like um, Patrick McCaffery just does not regularly rebound the ball, man. Like
Yep.
for a 4, a 6'9" 4, who's supposed to be, flexible positionally, does not rebound the ball well. Ben Krikke finished with 1 rebound in 14 minutes. Again, unacceptable. He was just challenged by Fran, and he comes out and gets 14 boards against Michigan State and just cannot continue to string those things together. Ladji Dembele only played just over 10 minutes, but just 2 rebounds. I mean, if Owen Freeman is your leading rebounder and then Peyton Sandfort is your second leading rebounder with 7, and then it's 4 from Josh Dix, 4 from Tony Perkins, 2 from Patrick McCaffery, Ladji, and Price. Brock Harding got 1, which that's a great effort by Brock Harding. But like that is not going to lead you to win basketball games, especially against the top 15 team in the country, a team that's got as much talent as Illinois does on both sides of the floor. It's just not going to get it done.
I mean, you mentioned the shooting, Elliot, and the 33% from 3, not great, not awful, especially for this team. It's not a super 3-point shooting team, but the 36% on 2s in that game yesterday, that is terrible. That is really, really bad. And then I think they're kind of exacerbating it by, like you said, not getting offensive rebounds. Like, you're missing the shots. The chance for an offensive board is there, which hopefully should be a tip in or something, another close shot, and they're not getting those opportunities either. So they're just really making things very hard on themselves all around. I think not making those shots and then not getting rebounds too. So that really hard.
That is exactly what I was going to bring up, Ross, too. And the fact that Perkins and Harding, I mean, we already know that Brock Harding is not quite the finisher at the rim that he really needs to be successful in the Big Ten. But those two together against Illinois were 2 for 16, just shooting 2-pointers. In fact, they were 1 for 1 from deep, thanks to Brock Harding. But when it's guards missing 2-pointers, you sort of lose the excuse of not having guys there in position for the offensive rebounds. All right, it's one thing if, like, Caitlin Clark is never going to lead the team in offensive rebounds because she's the one shooting, and she is. You don't want her on the glass, but when it's Perkins shooting from closer range, when it's Harding shooting from closer range, you want an Owen Freeman there on the offensive glass. You want a Ben Krikke. You want you should want a Patrick McCaffery there because he's 6'9". You want him on the offensive glass too. And you don't see that production coming out of them. Obviously the Sunday game against Illinois, we're not talking about Iowa as a team that only gets 7% of its offensive rebounds for the season, right? So this was an aberration on the worse end, but it is sort of indicative of the problem that this team has just in, it's just worse than usual Sunday. Owen Freeman, his 1 offensive rebound, he had 1, Dembele had 1. Iowa's 3rd offensive rebound was as a team. Like, it was a team rebound. So the ball had just gone out of bounds or it was a missed free throw or something. Like, if only 2 offensive rebounds come from your players in a game, you have to question, how are they boxing out wrong? Are they out of position on offense? Is it just a de-emphasis so they can get back on defense? Either way, you can't have guys like Perkins or Harding missing with that kind of regularity. And they should have understood that they should have understood pretty quickly that this was not going to be Tony's day, especially against a team as talented defensively as Illinois. You have to be able to adjust to that. And the fact that Iowa did not really helped Illinois keep that distance, even when the game started to get close there in that, the quote 3rd quarter, as it sort of got closer to the 10-minute mark of the 4th quarter, or excuse me, of the second half. Iowa not being able to capitalize on that, Iowa not being able to extend possessions. You have to be able to do that against a team like Illinois. You just have to. And I don't even know what you would expect Fran McCaffery to say to make that start to happen. It's sort of like, how do you coach a player to be better at dribbling? Like, or how do you coach better shot selection? At some point, it's on those guys on the court to be motivated enough to hit the glass, or to compete enough that you're not going to get taken out of the paint by a guy like Coleman Hawkins or a Quincy Guerriere. Because that guy's only like 6'8". You have to be able to go up against them, out physical them, or at the very least, like, stalemate them physically and go get that dang ball yourself. And you look at the seniors on this team in particular, they don't have that kind of dog in them on the glass yet. I think the younger kids do. And I think that they can be coached into even better rebounders. But, the older guys on this team are not the ones setting that example for them yet. And that is a great way to play your way into the NIT instead of the NCAA tournament.
So in regards to issues rebounding, Fran was asked about that post game, and what he said was, we just weren't going to the glass. That's it. It's not that they were lacking physicality. It's not an issue of technique in terms of boxing out, anything like that. Anything specific like that. It's just the fact that they didn't go to the glass, yet they still got beat in transition, like multiple times. They allowed 14 points, 14 fast break points to Illinois. So if the goal is to get back so you prevent transition points, he still allowed points in transition.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing at that point? Like, you're not trying to get the offensive board, but you're not getting back in transition. It's like you're just hanging out in the middle of the court or something. Like, you gotta pick an angle and do something.
Right. I think it's a combination of a couple things. I think Illinois is just really kind of nasty down there too. They've got some really strong physical bigs. I think so you have to give credit to Illinois where credit's due. But 42 missed shots and 2 offensive boards that's outside of that realm of just saying Illinois was better. Yep. It's not that. It's Iowa's lack of effort and energy, and I think it's a maybe not having a solid understanding of the game plan, which is unacceptable with 8 days off. Right?
Yeah.
So you have to point to a variety of things in this game. The two that stick out are the shooting and the lack of offensive boards. Illinois, thirdly, Illinois is a really damn good team. I thought. Sorry. Okay, let me start over here. I was thinking going into this game that Iowa had a really solid chance because they were playing such good ball. And I think that a good contingent of the fan base felt that way too. And during stretches of that game where it was in single digits, where it was 4 or 5 points that they got the lead down to, it did feel that way. So it's not necessarily a conversation about the discrepancy in talent as much as it is just making shots that you normally make and just getting the damn rebound. You can point to that discrepancy in talent. It's part of it. Illinois is a really good basketball team. They're really well coached. Terrence Shannon, for the issues that he's had, and I'm not going to speak on that any more than that. He's a damn good player. But Iowa should have been more competitive in that game than they were. And it's hard to say you beat yourself when shots just don't go down, but you beat yourself when you got 2 offensive rebounds in the whole game. So the other thing too that I'll address here, I'll hit it quick and then I'll go to you, Ross, is Brock Harding was what the team needed in the first half. almost every time he hits the floor, Tony Perkins gets 2 early fouls, what have you. Um, Almost every time he hits the floor, I feel the need to tweet something out like, we needed a Brock Harding spark in this game. Iowa needed some Brock Harding swagger in this game, and that's exactly what they needed. He played 12 minutes in the first half, posted 6 points and six assists, and then touched the floor for 2 minutes in the second half. And what did the guard who was ahead of him do? Tony Perkins finished 1 of 10. By the way, haven't even said this. He missed a dunk and a layup in 25 seconds. And like,
Yeah,
Tony's had a great stretch of games. Like, he was awesome for a while this season. I voted for him for third team all conference in our conference voting with the Purdue site, which of course we'll share on the premium board. Of course, I'm sure you can check it out on purdue.rivals.com. I voted for him for third team all conference because he was phenomenal. He looked like one of the best guards in the country for a while. And then this last stretch of games where the team is collectively playing really well, his production has fallen off. And he had a really tough game yesterday. I'll say that. I do think high-end Tony Perkins makes this team really good. And you have to have high-level guard play in the NCAA tournament. That's just a fact. That's the only way you're going to be successful is high-level guard play. And I think Brock Harding will eventually be that. What you needed yesterday was consistent production, and Brock Harding brought that, and Tony Perkins didn't. And I really think it's that black and white. Tony sat in the first half because he had 2 fouls. That's the only reason he was on the bench. And then Brock Harding comes in and essentially gets them back in the game. There's a 10-point deficit when it very well could have been 20 without that level. And the crowd was loudest when Brock was on the floor by far yesterday. By far. He's going to be a fan favorite in his time at Iowa. And yesterday was a peak example of why. And I think not playing him or playing him as little as he did in the second half, to a degree, I understand it because of, you look at total body of work, right? Tony Perkins is a senior. He's had some really great games this season, and a lot of those shots just didn't fall yesterday. But I think it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see Brock on the floor as much as he probably deserved yesterday, in my opinion. Fran was just a situation where he said, yeah, we got to see him get on the floor a little bit, but Tony's been there, done that. He's our guy. And I understand that. I really do. I just think putting Brock on the floor would have been better in the immediate, maybe not long term, but in the immediate for Iowa's chances to win. And that's a game you kind of have to win to guarantee you get a spot in the NCAA tournament. Not kind of, you have to win. What did I title the post-game recap? An opportunity squandered, because that's what it was.
Yeah, Tony Perkins is better than that, or better than the Illinois game, and I think he'd be the first one to tell you that. And Eliot, yeah, I think the players would also be the first ones to tell you that they could have played better, they should have played better, and that was an opportunity squandered. I don't normally like the single game plus minus stat because it can be really misleading. Often it's just sort of a reflection of like which team was hitting 3-pointers when you were on the floor. But when you look at that first half for Iowa, in the 12 minutes that Brock Harding played, Iowa was a +7. And in the 9 minutes with Perkins, a -16. And in the 8 minutes of Ben Krikke, a -17. And those track with the eye test. Like those were accurate reflections of how this team was playing when those guys were on the floor. And yeah, Brock's 6 assists in the first half. Iowa had 8 assists as a team in the first half. Like they got 1 from Patrick McCaffery, they got 1 from Josh Dix. And other than that, if it wasn't Brock Harding assisting those field goals, it was nobody. And Iowa's offense in particular depends on making those clean passes, finding guys in rhythm, like running that motion offense and like understanding that you're probably going to have less than like 1 second of an open window to get that shot up in the first place. Now, some of it was also, yeah, missing the shots and like not having them go in, but at the same time, you're trying to get points on the scoreboard. You're trying to like inject a little bit of energy into this team, and we've seen Tony sort of check out for a little bit when things don't start out his way. I'm also not a huge fan of the 2 foul jail, but it really does seem like something that benefits Tourney because he played a little bit better in that second half. But I mean, Brock is the straw that stirs the drink, and I think Iowa lets that drink sit unstirred way too long, way too often. And they're probably not going to have that luxury when Brock is elevated on the point guard depth chart, especially if Desante Bowen leaves. We technically we don't know how that's going to shake out too. I hope Bowen comes back for his sake because it would be a little bit of a bummer if he lets a tricky knee injury sort of help him out the door in Iowa because of his playing time. You know, like that'd be a tough final chapter for your Iowa career. But you do want to see the point guards have that leadership. And Eliot, you wrote about Brock Harding's leadership, but his sort of comes along with the territory of mostly spending the game on the bench. And there's only so much you can lead when you're number 9 in the rotation, you know, and I think to elevate Harding as a leader, to elevate his production, and to elevate where the team is, especially when Tony Perkins isn't having a great game or Josh Dix's shooting starts out slowly, just get Brock in there to stir stuff up and see what happens. Because usually it works out pretty well for Iowa, like very well, even if he's not hitting his shots with any regularity, because he's still really not there yet as a finisher. Even then, though, you get him on the floor and see what happens, because usually it drives the other team crazy.
You know why it drives the other team crazy is the ball pops when Brock is out on the floor. It moves.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a key to the way Fran McCaffery wants to do things offensively. Secondarily, Brock manipulates the pick and roll better than anybody else on that roster, especially with Owen Freeman.
Yeah.
Oh, their two-man game is almost unmatched. Probably, I wouldn't say in the Big Ten, but it's unmatched on the team. The way those two move in the pick and roll and know what each other is doing, it's going to be really beneficial for the few years to come between those two on this roster. And you talk about Brock Harding not only doing what he does on the floor, but additionally in sport, we talk about players having the it factor, and that's what Brock Harding has. He's got a magnetism to him. He's got confidence enough to say that he's a mixture of Ronald Acuna Jr. and Dansby Swanson in baseball, and he hasn't played the sport 5 years. And so he's got what this team needs to continue to have success, especially offensively. And he's it's almost cliched at this point, but he's got that dog in him defensively, despite being the size that he is. He makes up for that lack of size with energy and effort plays. And I mean, he had a very important steal. He had 2 steals yesterday, as a matter of fact. And one of which I know was a huge momentum shifter, and they didn't score on it. It was like Iowa got to points with that 4-5 point deficit where the crowd's starting to get really excited. It's about to pop, and then it just doesn't pop. That 4-5 point lead gets to 10. So everybody's like, no, that sucks. That's what that game was yesterday. And I think the lack of shots or making shots was an incredibly large portion of it, but the lack of minutes Brock Harding received was part of it too. I don't know if he received a standing ovation at the end of halftime, but he got some pretty big ovations to say the least when he was coming off the floor yesterday. He was awesome. And it's another situation where you say, man, the future's bright, and you hope for that to be the case. I mean, this 2024 class coming in is going to be good with Cooper Koch and Chris Tajo, but a lot of it's also contingent on whether or not Tony Perkins and Patrick McCaffery come back. Patrick recently said it at the presser last week when I was at the state basketball tournament, so I didn't hear it live, but Patrick was asked about coming back. He goes, no, I'm not coming back. And then kind of retracted and said, I probably shouldn't have answered that fast. It was like, you never know what can happen. and Tourney is still up in the air. But obviously, we don't know what Sante's going to do. We don't know what it's going to look like with Riley Mulvey, if he's going to hit the portal as well, but or anybody else in the roster for that matter. But
there's also the NBA question with Peyton.
Yeah,
He started to get mocked in like the
Right.
lower second rounds. Is that enough to make him think about the next level, or does he want to come back? Like, I think it'd be more beneficial for him to spend one more year at Iowa, but it is an open question at this point, and we don't really know the answer. So there's that uncertainty too. Sorry for interrupting you.
You're okay. And then, of course, when it comes to success in the portal, is it going to be another class of Ben Krikke and Evan Bronze, or are you going to be able to go out and get somebody who can contribute regularly and is consistent with their production? Bronze, for the athlete he just is a step slow. Which I'm hoping, and I push for Bronze to get more minutes, especially when Lodgy and Owen get in foul trouble, because he can be really fun and make a really big impact on the game. But it is that step slow defensively, and that does hurt Iowa. In terms of Krikke, it's what we saw yesterday, or what we saw yesterday, or it's super high offensive production, and he's your leading scorer like he was at the beginning of the year. So are you going to go out and get somebody who can contribute regularly on offense and who can make shots and who can be a guy that'll go get rebounds? We have yet to see, but a lot of things can change in a year, and there's no guarantee this roster will be intact to the degree that we can say, oh, it's bright because of XYZ guys, though I don't see a ton of guys leaving. Anyway, as far as their NCAA tournament hopes, probably going to have to win 2 or 3 games in the Big Ten tournament. They've got a hot Ohio State team in the first round. Then they got to face Illinois again, which it's tough to beat the same team 3 times in the regular season, of course. And after that, you'll probably play, I think it's Nebraska is at the other end of that. Ross, I know you wrote something up about
that. Great question. Who is the, I think it is Nebraska as the 3 seed over there. Let me just double check. Is it Nebraska?
We'll fix this in post.
Yes. Yep. Nebraska is the other team on the bottom of that that bracket. And that's a potential Saturday game. That that's so much has to go right for Iowa to get to that point. Winning those first 2 games to get to that, make that an option, is going to be really difficult for this team. Ohio State, they beat them once. That was a really tight game. Just, you were at that game. You recapped it, Eliot. It was back and forth the whole way. I was able to hold them off at the end, just made a few more shots. Had some really good free throw shooting down the stretch in that one. I remember that. Patrick McCaffery made a ton of free throws to ice that one for Iowa. But that was not an easy game. And Ohio State's been playing great since they got the new coach bounce, I guess, with they fired Chris Holtmann about a month ago, and the interim guy, whose name is escaping me at the moment.
Diebler.
Jake Diebler. He is 5-1, beat Purdue in his first game in charge, which that's a heck of a way to make a first impression. Surprisingly lost to Minnesota. Yeah. Lost to Minnesota in his second game. I guess a little bit of a hangover, maybe. I don't know. But they've won their last 4 games since then. They're coming into the Big Ten tournament red hot, probably, one of the hottest teams in the Big Ten. A lot of confidence. They're going to be a tough game for Iowa in that first round, or second round, technically, I guess. And then if Iowa gets through them, oh, great. They get Illinois again for the 3rd time in 3 weeks. And like you said, it's true. It's tough to beat a team 3 times in a season. At the same time, you watch these 2 Iowa-Illinois games, and I didn't always see a lot of things where it's like, man, Iowa's got a really good shot against them. Like there are a lot of things that Iowa does well against Illinois that, if they can just do a little bit more of that, they could win that game. Like that, the matchup is a tough one for Iowa no matter what. Shannon is a almost impossible guy for Iowa to defend. We saw that yesterday. Hawkins, he destroyed Iowa in the first game in Champaign. He had, career high 30 points, just abused whoever Iowa tried to defend him with. So they've got a lot of weapons, a lot of bad matchups for Iowa. That's one of those games where Iowa would need to be just red hot from 3-point land, I think, to get that one. So I think Iowa's look, and I mentioned this in my preview, like if Iowa was going to beat Illinois, like yesterday seemed like the day to do it. You're at home, you've got a sellout crowd, you had 8 days to prep for the game. You had a whole week of rest and prep, and they came out and couldn't make shots, obviously, and that's what did them in. Play them again in Chicago. It's gonna be the second game in a row if it happens, 2 days in a row. So much less rest, much less prep. Just a really, really tough road for Iowa, I think, to make it back to the NCAAs this round. What do you guys? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. It's one thing to say, yeah, it's tough to beat a team 3 times in a row, but it's not like if Iowa had to play the Denver Nuggets 3 times, that like, oh, third time's a charm, like, oh, we've solved the Jokic puzzle. And Illinois is not quite the Denver Nuggets, but Illinois does just pose matchup problems that they clearly know how to exploit, because they made that game more or less a laugher in the early going. I think I think a tournament game, or a Big Ten tournament game, would be a little bit more competitive, just with some regression to the mean. I mean, Iowa shot under 33% from just like layups. They were 6 for 19 against Illinois at the rim. I don't think that's going to continue, no matter how good and physical Illinois' bigs are, just because that's not Iowa's level of quality. We've seen Iowa play better than that against good teams. I think they would do better than that just on paper. But again, we know Illinois knows how to beat Iowa, and without breaking much of a sweat. So yeah, I do want to see these two teams play again, not only for the purposes of Iowa's chances of making it back to the big dance, but just, let's just see what happens on a neutral court when Iowa is not spending the entire game digging themselves out of a 21-point deficit. Now, if Iowa does find themselves in a 21-point deficit in the BTT, that's only so surprising. Well, kind of saw that one coming too. But as long as I was able to stay out of those danger situations, if they're not trying to dig out of an avalanche, maybe the game unfolds a little bit differently. Maybe Perkins doesn't find himself, in his own head and going 1 for 10 from the field again. But these are all maybes. These are all what ifs. This is all paper sort of stuff. Iowa just needs to string together wins. That's all they need to do.
Also a lot easier said than done, especially when you face Ohio State in the first round. So this is all contingent on them beating the Buckeyes in that first round after barely beating them before, and having this new coach spike of energy and coming back and playing really good ball as of late. So how many games do the Hawkeyes have to win in order to get themselves into the tournament? At least 2, right?
Yeah, I would say at least 2. I mean, a third game if it's Nebraska. I mean, maybe. I don't know if they would need that one or not. Some people were saying that if they got through the Illinois game, that would be enough. I don't know. But at minimum, they're going to have to be playing on Saturday at the Big Ten tournament. There's no way around it, I think, if for them to get into the NCAAs. They got to beat Ohio State, got to beat Illinois. Those are locks for any potential bid.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Yeah, the 2 wins at a bare minimum, and really it does sort of feel like 3 is the point at which I was able to account for, sort of those contingencies, the bid stealers, the other team sort of making their own Tourney strengthening wins, like, maybe New Mexico makes a run in their tournament, or Texas A&M. Those are also teams that sort of find themselves in that same wrong side of the bubble that Iowa's in. Or, one of these play-in type games, like Indiana State is one of those candidates, which, by the way, they're in that discussion because Drake beat them in the Missouri Valley Conference. That's Des Moines' own Drake men's Bulldogs are in the NCAA tournament. Just wanted to shout them out too. Yay for Des Moines. But like that, what that also means is that Indiana State is one of those teams that all of a sudden is occupying that spot in that play-in game that Iowa did not really have to account for going into Sunday, because it really looked like, and even with a few minutes to go, it still looked like Indiana State would have taken that win, and that would have been a 1-bid league. Now it looks like the Missouri Valley is a 2-bid league. So now that is something completely outside of Iowa's control that bumps them one more spot down the bubble. If that happens again, or it could be any conference, it could be this, that, whoever plays their way into the tournament ahead of Iowa just makes that lift more difficult. And we see it happen every year. So 2 wins gets Iowa into that discussion if there's no other additional hurdles that get put in their way. I think Iowa, if they really want to feel confident about this, it's a 3-win ask. And we're talking about a hot Ohio State team. We're talking about Illinois. We're talking about whoever makes it out of that, the 3 seeds line too, whether that ends up being Nebraska or whoever. So these are very difficult teams that Iowa has to beat to even find themselves in that March Madness discussion. And, with the way that this team has played all year, they haven't been in that discussion because they haven't really been earning it. So if Iowa finds itself coming up short, that's a tough thing for them, for the players, and for Fran McCaffery and all that. But it also, sort of tracks with how their season's gone, right? Like they've played like an NIT team kind of all year, haven't they?
Well, yes and no. Over
With
this last
some
stretch of being
exceptions.
hot, they've looked like an NCAA tournament team, right? And that 3-game win streak that we talked about when I was up in Minneapolis, they looked like an NCAA tournament team. But
yeah, but that was
picture,
about it.
Big picture, NIT.
Yeah,
big
yeah.
picture. Yes. Now
you make it to the tournament by stringing together more than 3 games of looking like a tournament team.
Right. Breaking news on the hotcast. Now, stay tuned to iowa.rivals.com, because we're going to be getting some football content this coming week with Iowa's Pro Day being held on campus. We'll be talking with some of the players that are going to be hopefully headed to the NFL here sooner rather than later. Before we wrap things up here, Adam, while we're talking about Drake, I'm curious. Can you name a player on the roster besides Tucker DeVries?
Darnell Brody.
Oh, damn.
Come on. This is my hometown. This is Des Moines' team, buddy.
Can you name one more?
You're asking somebody with ADHD, man.
Okay.
I'm blaming the learning disability on this one. This is ableism at its finest.
Oh, God.
Am I just playing for time? So with my offhand, the one that you can't see on camera, am I just bringing up Drake's Ken Palm thing so I could? No, that's not happening.
Connor
that's
Enright.
Connor
Enright.
Yes. Oh, he's got that like floppy little mop thing. Like he's a fun player to watch.
He is. Drake will be a fun team to watch rather in the NCAA tournament once again. Darren DeVries doing an awesome job there in Des Moines. Don't know how much longer he's going to be there. That's a good coach. That is a good coach. We shall see, and we will wrap it up here on this episode of Hotcast. We appreciate you tuning in. Of course, if you are not a subscriber on our YouTube channel, we'd love to have you. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know, do you think the Iowa men's team can make it to the NCAA tournament? And for the women, will they get back to that Final Four? We shall see. We shall see. The brackets come out next Sunday. Stay tuned again to iowa.rivals.com for all your Hawkeyes content. The men headed to Minneapolis to take on Ohio State on Thursday. I will be there. Follow me on Twitter to follow along. It's at Eliot Clough there. If you are not a premium subscriber on iowa.rivals.com. You can do that today at iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. Again, we'd love to have you. Don't want you to miss out on any premium content from us. That's recruiting, that's football, that's basketball. We've got all the intel for you there. So once again, folks, my name is Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Adam Jacoby and Ross Binder on this episode of Hotcast. We will see you next time.